you for listening to GCN. Be sure to visit GCNlive.com today.
We've been talking connective tissue, which along with the muscle tissue forms the bulk of our bodies, maybe 80% or so. Somewhere in that range, 70, 80, 85% maybe of our body is a blend of connective tissue and muscle tissue. If you've ever seen the Bodies exhibit, where they show you what a physical body looks like, a dead body looks like in terms of its meat, if you will, its flesh, if you will, you've seen connective tissue and muscle tissue. The muscle tissue, connective tissue kind of wraps around the muscle tissue. The muscle tissue is the stuff that allows us to move. You got three types of muscle. Three types of muscle tissue. You got the kind that most of us know about. That's called the skeletal muscle, or most of us think about. But you have also a type of muscle called heart muscle or cardiac muscle. This is distinct from our bone muscle or our skeletal muscle. And then you have the muscle that's involved with all the movement in our organs, in our internal structures, involuntary muscle, or they call it smooth muscle. But the kind most of us think about is skeletal muscle, and skeletal muscle makes up about 40% or so of our bodies. So between the skeletal muscle and the connective tissue, you've got the mass of the body. The skeletal muscle is absolutely amazing from a cell perspective. Remember, all this tissue is made up of cells, and what we call muscle cells they're crazy. They have this ability to ratchet via different fibers that are inside the cells. They pull and push. You may have heard of the terms actin and myosin. Actin and myosin are tiny little fibers that pull, and via this pulling action, they don't push, they pull. And via this pulling action, they create all the movement. So you got, this is crazy, you guys. You've got tissue, right? And then the tissue's made up of little cells. And then inside the little cells, you got pulling fibers. And these pulling fibers are really the ultimate source of the movement of our bones, of our skeletal muscle. These little pulling fibers in muscle cells. You think that means you got to keep your muscle cells healthy? You better believe it. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about muscle cells and movement. And by the way, statin drugs are specific for messing up your muscle cells. Just another reason why you don't want to participate in the stupidity of statin mania, even though I know many, if not most people, well, many people anyway, probably a quarter of Americans are on one of those things. Anyway, one of the key features of life is movement. The fact that it's dynamic. And in terms of we human beings, movement is youth. Movement is health. Movement is vitality. Stagnation is illness. Stagnation is ultimately death. Death is, of course, the quintessential example, the definition of no movement. So stagnation's the enemy. Movement, dynamism, is where health resides. Last month, Time magazine ran a cover story about the importance of movement. They called it the exercise cure. And more we're reading about this. You know, intuitively we knew this, and of course there were always people like Jack LaLanne and Bernard McFadden. We talked about him back in the 1920s, who understood the importance of exercise and the importance of movement. But for the most part, from a scientific perspective, from a biochemical perspective, we're learning more and more every day. And we know so much more today than we did 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, even though we intuitively understood it. Today we know that there's a scientific basis to exercise for health. This is what this Time magazine article was about. They call it the exercise cure. It's on the cover, the exercise cure, subtitled The Surprising Science of a Life-Changing Workout. According to the article, which was about longevity and exercise, this is awesome. According to this article, all you need is a 10-minute workout. Now, where have you heard this before? I've been doing this now for years. The 10-minute workout. I should have written a book on it. I should have, I knew from common sense that if I got a 10-minute workout, but it was intense, it was a way better workout than if I was in there for an hour screwing around. Anyway, this article, they did a study on the 10-minute workout. They call it the micro workout. And when done correctly, they found that you could get as much improvement in heart function, remember, cardiac muscle, and blood sugar control, which turns out there's a very important relationship between movement and insulin. No movement, and your blood sugar doesn't really have a place to go, so it ends up as fat. No movement after sugar is going to encourage obesity. Insulin's going to come yank all that sugar out because you're not using it. Anyway, the key here was intensity. They found that you could get as good a workout in 10 minutes as you could in 50 minutes, but you had to do it intensely. The 10-minute workout consisted of, quote, 3 exhausting 20-second bouts of all-out, hardest you can exercise, followed by brief recoveries. In the words of the study's author, Martin Gibala, he's an exercise physiologist from McMaster University, if you're able to push hard, you can get away with surprisingly little exercise. He's right. You don't need a lot of exercise. You don't need a lot of food, and you don't need a lot of exercise. Personally, I don't even think you need 10 minutes. You can, in my opinion, get a perfectly effective anti-aging exercise in 3 or 4 minutes, but you're going to have to be uncomfortable, and that is the key. No one wants to be uncomfortable. The body doesn't like being uncomfortable, so you got to override the body with the mind. Now, the body likes the feeling after we recover from discomfort. That's a good feeling, ironically, because you got to get through the discomfort to get to the good feeling. That's why you feel really good after a workout. After you're uncomfortable, immediately after you're uncomfortable, there's an increased sense of comfortable. So you do get a reward at the end, but you got to bust through it. And most people don't want to bust through it. The only way to really bust through that tendency for the body to not want to be uncomfortable is through mental willingness. And the reward for pushing, for using mental willingness to push through is better health, better well-being, longevity, and just feeling good. Now, muscle tissue is important. The skeletal muscle tissue is important, but the muscle tissue can't do it alone. Just muscles contracting and relaxing aren't going to get you anywhere. The muscles have to have something to push and pull against. And this is where the bones come in. You don't get any movement just by moving muscles, but the muscles are connected to the bones, and that's where the movement comes in. And what is it that connects the bones to the muscle? That connects the bones to the muscle? Connective tissue, yes. All right, we'll continue talking about this when we come back from our break. I'm Pharmacist Ben. You're listening to The Bright Side. We'll be back right after this. So we're talking about this very important relationship between connective tissue and muscle tissue. Moving the muscle connective tissue complex, if you will, the connective tissue muscle tissue complex, that's the bulk of our bodies. Moving this system is what health is about. In terms of the skin, moving the system can be accomplished using topical strategies. This is where alpha hydroxy acids come in. They stimulate movement in the connective tissue. They're dynamic. They encourage dynamism. They also encourage dynamism in the surface. But much of their effects, much of the benefits you get from using alpha hydroxy acids on top of your skin involves the connective tissue, which we will be talking about here in the near future. In terms of the skeleton, the connective tissue in the skeleton itself, by the way, is connective tissue. The bones themselves are connective tissue, but there's also a type of connective tissue that links the muscles to the connective tissue, I guess. There's a connective tissue muscle tissue link that we call tendons. This connective tissue muscle tissue link is how the whole thing's put together. The tendons, you can see the tendons on the back of your hand if you wiggle your fingers. The tendons links the muscles to the bone. The bone being a type of connective tissue. So the tendons are a connective tissue that links the muscles to the skeletal system, which are a type of connective tissue. So you've got connective tissue in between connective tissue and muscle. We call that the tendons. The ligaments, by the way, are the connective tissue that links all the bones together. So you got all this connective tissue wiring. It's kind of like you're a marionette, in a way. You got all of this wiring and everything is moving around between connective tissue and muscles. The bones, by the way, got 600 different bones, and that's the bulk of us. The bones and the connective tissue and the muscle. The only time we ever think about this system, by the way, is when we get an inflamed tendon, when we work too hard, or we're not nourished correctly, or we're eating too much sugar, or there's too much inflammatory factors. Why is it that the tendon becomes inflamed? That is very interesting. The tendon becomes inflamed, and the ligaments, for that matter, become inflamed. This is where you get tendinitis from. And the weak ligaments are also associated with this. All All of this comes into play when the cells, it's all about the cells, remember, when the cells in the connective tissue are not getting fed correctly, not getting oxygenated correctly, and not getting detoxified. And it all happens with the extracellular matrix, the ECM, which is made up of glucosamine, partially. So remember, it's all about jello and raisins. The raisins are sitting in the jello, in the muscles, in the connective tissue, in the ligaments. You got a strained ligament, you have a tendonitis issue. Probably it's the jello that's surrounding the tendon cells. It could very well be the jello that's surrounding the ligaments if you strain your ligaments, or if you chronically strain your ligaments. This extracellular matrix is the part that oxygenates, it detoxifies, and it feeds the cells of the connective tissue. That makes the extracellular matrix super duper important. And building the extracellular matrix, feeding it with raw materials, feeding the cells with raw materials to make this extracellular matrix is key. And that's why glucosamine is so awesome for so many different things. That's why glucosamine and N-acetylglucosamine, that we've been talking about also, are so important for feeding the cells that make this extracellular matrix that itself feeds the connective tissue. So think of it this way. You got your raisins, you eat your glucosamine, or take your glucosamine supplement, or eat your gelatin, or eat your collagen, or eat your bone soup. It goes into your blood, and it goes into the cells. The cells, at least components of it, the cells then turn around and make the extracellular matrix out of that. You're feeding your cells, the cells are spewing out extracellular matrix. Into the cells goes the raw material, out of the cells comes the extracellular matrix. That means eating that stuff, getting that raw material in your system is incredibly important. The extracellular matrix, the stuff that the cells are sitting in, like fruit in a jello mold or like raisins in bread, this ECM, we'll call it the ECM, is made from cells that themselves are fed by the supplements we take and the bone soup and collagen and bone broth protein and foods that we eat. That's why you want to supplement with these things every day. Anywhere where you have a muscle and connective tissue, and that includes the heart, by the way. The heart there's something called the cardiac skeleton, which is connective tissue in the heart. The brain is connective tissue. Wherever you have this stuff, you are going to benefit by using glucosamine, N-acetylglucosamine, bone soup, cartilage. This was one of Dr. Wallach's brilliant insights, among many brilliant insights. One of his chief insights, and one of the main reasons why I got into following and listening to what Dr. Wallach said, was when I got popped in that Dead Doctors Don't Lie tape 20 years ago, and I heard him talking about cartilage. We learned about cartilage in pharmacy school, the importance of nutritional cartilage and medicinal and therapeutic cartilage. We learned about that in pharmacy school, and Doc was talking about it. Then he was talking about it for the joints, then he understood the power of it for the joints, but it turns out that anything you take for your joints is going to help connective tissue everywhere, and that includes your brain and your heart. And that's a very powerful message, you guys. Nobody's talking about this. That means if you have Alzheimer's disease, you will benefit from building your connective tissue. Dementia itself is a connective tissue problem. And probably heart disease is a connective tissue problem. I'm not seeing that literally, but it just makes sense that it would be a connective tissue problem. All of the visible signs of aging are connective tissue problems. That makes connective tissue ridiculously important. And the connective tissue, the building of connective tissue sometimes goes awry, not just in terms of not making connective tissue, but also making too much connective tissue. I saw a guy yesterday, broke my heart, man. He was about probably in his 30s, and he had a keloid. A keloid, by the way, is this big chunk of connective tissue that African American men will get, and sometimes Hispanic men. Sometimes, mostly African Americans, but sometimes Hispanics and sometimes Caucasians will get this too. A keloid is a big chunk of connective tissue that occurs after the skin is wounded. It's an improper healing response. One of the ways the body repairs itself is by secreting connective tissue. When you cut yourself, one of the reasons why you don't see the cut any longer after a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or however long it takes to heal is because there's the connective tissue has been, synthesis, production, has been upregulated or increased. So connective tissue stimulation is a response to wounding. This, by the way, is the importance of controlled wounding with alpha hydroxy acids and using other things. That's what exercise is too, by the way. So anyway, the connective tissue, when it's wounded, is upregulated. But if you have a keloid, it doesn't stop. And this is a very important way that we age and break down and get sick. Fibrosis, even amyloidosis. You may have heard of this. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll come back. You're listening to The Bright Side on the Genesis Communication Network. Okay, from one of my all-time favorite journals, Cosmetics and Toiletries. Been reading this one for almost 30 years. Cosmetics and Toiletries. According to this is from October edition, cannabis oil product is set to expand for beauty and cosmetics. Expect to see this in the very near future. Cannabis oil, particularly something called CBD, which we've talked about here periodically. I'm going to be having a very high-powered CBD oil on my website, brightsidehealth.com, in the very near future. You will be hearing about it. Cannabis oil, or CBD oil, I'll call it, is absolutely incredible stuff. And particularly this CBD oil that I've been using now for 6 months or so. It is unbelievable. The science on this stuff is through the roof. I'm telling you, and expect to see it being made illegal soon because it is so darn effective, and drug companies are looking to patent it for seizures and for pain and anti-cancer and for mood. And you don't get high, by the way, with this stuff. It's not an intoxicant. There may be some mood-enhancing properties, and this is where the government is going to probably be regulating it. But as far as cancer, anti-cancer, and as far as skin cancer, I've seen this with my own eyes. I'm not just telling you from the research, which, by the way, is voluminous. I've seen it with my own eyes. Here's a good one. Expression of cannabinoid receptor 2 and its inhibitory effects on synovial fibroblasts in rheumatoid arthritis. That means that cannabinoids are involved in modulating arthritis. Cannabinoids are anti-inflammatory in the case of arthritis. CBD oil now for arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis, that's the immune kind. From the tumor biology program at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. Love this. Cancer cells have Alzheimer's disease too. Check this out. You know the plaques, the fibers that form. This is what the fibers are what get blamed for Alzheimer's disease. There's fibers. Do you know those fibers actually fight cancer? They're in cancer cells to protect the body. The cancer cell somehow will have these, or a normal cell will somehow have these fibers that will control the growth. When these fibers break down, cancer cells metastasize, cancer cells proliferate. So it turns out that the fibers are protective. The fibers have an immune regulating and anti-inflammatory property. Now this is so important because fibrosis is a major cause of disease. You hear about it all the time. Heart disease is fibrosis. Alzheimer's disease is fibrosis. You can have fibrosis in the lungs. You can have fibrosis in the female reproductive system. You can have fibrosis anywhere in the body. And I was telling you about keloids before we went to our break. Keloids are this big hunk of fibers. It's a fibrosis that occurs in the skin, and it is awful. This poor guy I saw on the walking down the street. He had a fibrosis or a keloid on his face that was the size, I'm not kidding you folks, of a cantaloupe. Okay? It was that big, and it broke my heart to see that. Because this is a sign of a body that's out of control. This is a sign of skin cells, fibroblasts, that are out of control. Fibroblasts, fiber-making cells that are cranking out fibers, are cranking out fibers in this out-of-control fashion to do something. It doesn't just happen. When you have fibrosis, you have the body's attempt to repair or to control inflammation. Fibrosis is the sign that the body is trying to heal something. What does that tell you? Why would it be trying to heal something if something wasn't broken down? What's broken down is the connective tissue. Fibrosis is a sign of broken down connective tissue. Anybody dealing with fibrosis, you need to hear this. And we'll continue when we come back from our break. I'm Pharmacist Ben. You are listening to The Bright Side. We'll be back right after this. All right, we're back on The Bright Side. Pharmacist Ben here. Talking about the connective tissue and the importance of growing connective tissue, the importance of helping the connective tissue grow, and the connective tissue grows by feeding the cells that make the connective tissue like anything else in the body. If you're dealing with fibrosis issues, you are dealing with a connective tissue problem, and fibrosis issues are all over the place and the cause of great distress and great pain, and doctors don't know what to do about it except suppress inflammation. That's the only strategy a doctor has for dealing with fibrosis, to suppress inflammation. If you're dealing with a fibrosis issue, you're SOL, S out of luck, if you're trying to go to a doctor to fix it. All you can do is remove it through a surgical procedure or somehow drug the body into, poison the body into suppressing the inflammatory response that's associated. But as far as correcting the fibrotic issue, you have to work at the level of the extracellular matrix, the stuff that surrounds the connective tissue. If you're dealing with carpal tunnel syndrome, Dupuytren's contracture. I talked about this guy, Tom, if you're probably listening to the program now. A couple weeks ago, he had a condition called Dupuytren's contracture. Dupuytren's contracture is a connective tissue problem that occurs in the hands. And you get this inflamed and connective tissue and hyperproduction of fibers. Hyperproduction of fibers is the cause, the ultimate cause of fibrosis. And this hyperproduction is an attempt for the body's attempt to repair something. The body's attempt to repair a chronic wounding in the connective tissue, in the extracellular matrix. That's why glucosamine is important and vitamin C is important. And there's a bunch of supplements that you could take to help support this extracellular matrix. CMO, you may have heard of our longevity CMO cream. Acetyl myristoyl will help you repair connective tissue, help you repair this extracellular matrix to reduce fibrosis. Keeping sugar out of the diet, keeping toxins out of the diet from the digestive system. This is a major cause of damage to the extracellular matrix leading to fibrosis. So you get damage to the extracellular matrix, that leads to the secretion of fibers, that leads to all of fibrotic conditions that we know of, including cardiac fibrosis, which is the cause of heart disease, much of the cause of heart disease. Hardening of the arteries is fibrosis following broken down extracellular matrix. Alzheimer's disease. And of course, fibrotic breasts and fibrotic soft tissue and fibrotic anywhere you hear the word fibrosis. All right, check this out. The 5 top active cities in the country. These are the cities that are the most active, have the most activity. 5 Washington, 4 New York, 3 Chicago, 2 San Francisco, and the most active city in the country, Boston, Massachusetts. I'm surprised Denver's not in there with all the bike paths we have, or for that matter, Seattle or Portland. By the way, the number 1 healthiest place to live in America, number 1, I'm proud to say, according to CNN anyway, I don't know what that means, but according to CNN, the number 1 healthiest city in the country is Highlands Ranch, Colorado. I know I got some listeners in Highlands Ranch. You are number 1, the lowest obesity rate in the country in Highlands Ranch, Colorado. All right. Enjoying your workout is the best motivation. This is from Frontiers in Psychology. This is also very important. You want to enjoy what you're doing. You know, the human beings want to enjoy what they're doing. That's why we talked about, big reason why we don't exercise is because it's unpleasant. But if you're, riding your bike, that's exercise. If you're riding outside and you're, nice sunny day, and you could be enjoying what you're doing. If you can find a way to exercise and enjoy what you're doing, that can be a very helpful strategy for getting in the gym. You can make yourself enjoy what you're doing too, by the way. You can kind of mind over matter it and find some joy in bodily movement. That's a key way to get yourself in the gym. All right, this is another good one here. Skin defenses point to eczema therapies. According to the University of Edinburgh MRC Center for Inflammation Research, the body's defenses are involved in dermatitis, atopic dermatitis, also known as eczema. Oh, surprise, surprise. It's a defensive condition. This is so important because if you have a defensive problem, you have, by definition, an offending agent. Eczema is a defensive problem, like all diseases, or like many diseases are defensive problems. That means there's an offending agent. If you want to cure your eczema without a doctor, find out what the offending agent is, unless you'd rather go to a doctor and just suppress the defensive response. I think that's kind of silly. although you may get some immediate relief. From the British Heart Foundation at the University of Oxford, the first of our 3 billion heartbeats occurs sooner than we thought. This is amazing. Our first heartbeat takes place at day 21 of human pregnancy. That's when our heart first starts to beat. How can this possibly be that you have a heart at day 16, a functional heart at day 16, 16 days after conception? This is absolutely amazing, but it's really, really important when it comes to congenital heart issues. Yesterday we talked about a football player, Quentin Groves, who had a congenital heart condition where he had an extra electrical wire, if you will, an extra electrical pathway in his heart that was causing his heart to beat too fast. It's a congenital problem. Now, it's not deadly, it's not fatal, it's not life-threatening necessarily. Quentin Groves lived, he was a NFL football player, a prime athlete, and he was pretty much a specimen of unbelievable health if you ever saw him. I only saw him on TV, but he looked pretty amazing. He had this congenital heart condition. Now, the fact that the heart starts at day 16 means if you are a mother and you are pregnant or thinking of getting pregnant, it's so critical to start your supplement program early. In fact, you should start your supplement program 2 months before you decide to conceive a baby if you're planning a conception. If you're not and you just get pregnant, start right away if you want to have a healthy baby. At day 21, the heart is already starting to form. That means a congenital birth defect can occur that early. And this is where congenital problems begin. We always say there's no genetic diseases. Dr. Wallach always says there's no genetic diseases. And really, he's right, but in a way, all diseases are genetic because everything's genetic. What Doc means, and what the important take-home point is you're not condemned. If you do have a congenital health issue, and of course there are congenital genetic diseases where you're just born with cystic fibrosis or something like that, that's because somehow the cells were not getting nourished in the womb. This isn't about blaming anybody, by the way. This is just the facts. This is just how the body works. A congenital issue is a lack of nutrition or a toxicity or an oxygenation that occurs in the womb the same way that any health problem is toxicity, lack of nutrition, and suffocation. All disease is cell disease, whether it's in the womb or outside the womb, which is why mothers who are pregnant need to be doing everything that we all have to do to stay healthy, except they got to do it with more vigilance. In the womb, day 16, your heart's already starting to form, or day 21, the heart is already starting to form. That means you better make sure, moms who are building babies in the womb, that you're supplementing and that you're using nutritional strategies and that you're staying away from problem foods and that you're deep breathing and you're lowering your cortisol, keeping your insulin in check, and also, of course, getting on a powerful and efficient and well-rounded and comprehensive nutritional supplement program like the one designed by Dr. Wallach and Longevity. It's called the Healthy Start Pack. Especially if you're pregnant, omega-3 fatty acids, iodine, the B complex. I always hate isolating the essential fatty acids. I always hate isolating supplements, but there are supplements that are more important for building. But you just want to be on an all-around comprehensive program. If you're pregnant, the body of a baby is starting to form very, very early. The heart itself is starting to form at day 16. All right. Thank you so much for listening to The Bright Side, friends. We're just flat out of time. I wish we had more calls, but I wish we had calls, but we didn't, and that's just how it is. Oh, I got one more thing I want to tell you here. Cardiologists say new calcium supplement study is no reason to panic. I think we're going to talk about this tomorrow because this is really important. There's a lot of nonsense about calcium intake and coronary artery calcification, and I mean real nonsense. Just because you take calcium doesn't mean your arteries are going to calcify. Now you know why, because hardening of the arteries or calcification of the arteries is not a calcium problem. It's a damaged extracellular matrix problem. And only a biological bonehead would tell you to stop taking calcium in order to prevent calcification of the arteries. It's not how vitamins and minerals work. You can't, and I hear this with vitamin K all the time. This gets one of my pet peeves. The idea that you can't take vitamin K if you're somehow on a blood thinner, or too much vitamin K will somehow thin your blood. All right, there's so much to talk about, and we'll continue this discussion about ECM, extracellular matrix, and connective tissue building, and anti-aging, and nutritional supplementation on The Bright Side tomorrow. Check out my website, brightsideben.com, and please sign up to join the Bright Side Ben team if you like what you hear on this program. If you're a believer in the world of supplementation and nutrition and exercise and these wonderful strategies to reverse chronic degenerative disease, if you believe the body's a healing system, you want to help me in my mission to educate the world about the power and importance of a good nutritional supplement program. Thanks for listening, friends. Have an awesome, wonderful, beautiful, spectacular day. We'll talk to y'all later. Bye for now.